Outsourcing governmental responsibilities to private contractors is a routine practice that has harmed principles of equity, particularly for the immigration detention system. Increasingly, the Department of Justice and the Department of Homeland Security are outsourcing their imprisonment and detention responsibilities to hundreds of contractors and subcontractors with scant oversight, little transparency, lack of coordination, and often tragic consequences. As a result, human rights abuses, squandering of public revenues, and unscrupulous profiteering pervade and pervert the U.S. system of crime and punishment. Basic procedures federal government outsourcers follow is to sign intergovernmental agreements, IGSAs, with local and state governments, mostly county governments, that authorize the cooperating government to hold federal detainees or prisoners. In many such cases, the local government then turns around and contracts out the management and operation of the prison or detention center to private prison companies and to prison service subcontractors. Because this shadow industry is largely profit-driven and has evolved without a plan or strategy, it has become a bizarre, labyrinthine complex of public and private players that is little understood and frighteningly out of control. With us to speak about privatization of detention is Ken Koprzynski, author of Private Capital Punishment, the Florida Model, available through www.privateci.org, and Legislative and Political Affairs Assistant for the Florida Police Benevolent Association and Executive Director for the Private Corrections Working Group. Ken has been following prison privatization issues for over 13 years. Tell us about the events described in your book.
Well, Maria, as a legislative and political affairs assistant for the Florida PBA, one of my responsibilities is to monitor action over in the legislature. And back in 1997, I was in a House Corrections Appropriations Committee. And at that time, the agency that oversaw the private prisons in the state of Florida was doing its basically dog and pony to justify its existence. Florida is the only state in the nation with two departments of corrections, one for the private industry and the other for the public facilities. And at that time, the executive director, Mark Hodges, of the Correctional Privatization Commission, had introduced a gentleman by the name of Dr. Charles Thomas, who at that time was a consultant for the Correctional Privatization Commission. He ran the Private Corrections Project at the University of Florida and was the guru on prison privatization. And I started asking questions about his funding, found out that largely his funding was paid for by the industry he was overseeing.
And how did you react to this information?
Well, when it came to our attention that he was taking money from the Corrections Corporation of America, Wackenhut, which is now GEO Group, I contacted Mark Hodges, the executive director for the state agency, and told him that this was an obvious conflict of interest. This gentleman was taking money from the very same entities that he was charged with overseeing. So we told Mark that we would take legal action. Mark didn't believe me. Well, he didn't believe that we would take legal action. It basically blew me off. So we ended up filing an ethics complaint against Dr. Thomas. 2 years later, the Ethics Commission found that he had violated Florida law and fined him the largest civil penalty they could for his interest in the industry. At the same time, he was a state employee overseeing the industry. We also uncovered the fact that both Dr. Thomas and Mark Hodges were in business together, going around the nation promoting prison privatization. And in fact, Mark Hodges was running a private consulting business from his state office. So we filed an ethics complaint against Mark, and he ended up also pleading to 6 charges on ethics, and so he's no longer with us either.
Now, you subsequently, you were the founder of the Private Corrections Institute, or at least very much involved in the founding of it, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. In uncovering the issues associated with the private prison industry in Florida. We uncovered a number of other issues related to prison privatization throughout the United States. So we determined that there was a need for an organization nationwide to address the issues that the vendors wouldn't tell you about. So I always consider it the Paul Harvey side of it. You know, now the rest of the story. Here's what the industry tells you, but here's really what's going on in these facilities and what actually happens.
And how did this, your initial experience with uncovering this corruption, how does this shape your subsequent work and your views of the industry?
Well, if you ignore the moral issue of incarcerating people for profit, and you just look at the way that the industry operates, they're making a profit on the incarceration of human beings. And the way that they do that is they sell these prisons and these jails to the local community as economic development and jobs. But their bottom line is their bottom line. They're there to make a profit, and they do it on the backs of their employees and in the lack of services and care of the inmate.